You feel it in your stomach, that cold, tightening knot when the world turns against you. The layoff notice, the medical diagnosis, the betrayal. That moment when the problem, the obstacle, looks enormous, overwhelming. You are surrounded. You start calculating your escape routes, your defenses. You are operating from the mindset of the prey, the sheep. This is the fundamental error of the human condition. We are born with the DNA of a king, but we choose to behave like livestock, waiting for the slaughter. We mistake our temporary circumstances for our eternal identity. We look at the mountain of debt and forget we possess the hammer to shatter it. We look at the darkness and forget we are the sun. Fear is not the problem. Fear is the natural alarm system. Fear is the symptom of forgetting who you are. The moment you shrink your inner life to match the size of your external problem, you lose. You give away your sovereignty. You trade the roar for the bleat.
The purpose of this practice, the core technology of Nichiren Buddhism, is to reverse that transaction, to install what we call the Lion King mentality. It is the absolute spiritual posture that refuses to be intimidated by anything in the universe. When you look at your life, you need to stop asking, "How do I survive this?" and start asking, "How do I attack this?" The lion's roar is not just a sound. It is a declaration of inherent, unstoppable Buddhahood. It is the sound that shatters the chains of delusion that tell you you are small, weak, or unworthy. It is the sound that tells the universe, "I am the master of my mind, and these problems are simply fuel." To understand this posture, you must understand the man who forged it. Nichiren Daishonin did not develop this spiritual steel in a peaceful monastery garden. He forged it in the fire of absolute, unrelenting persecution. Imagine 13th century Japan, a world of famine, plague, civil war, and natural disaster.
The people were desperate, living in an age that Buddhist texts call the latter day of the law, a time when true enlightenment seems impossible to achieve. The established Buddhist schools offered solace, but Nichiren saw something deeper, a fundamental corruption in the interpretation of the ultimate law. He saw that the very teachings meant to liberate people were being used to pacify them into accepting suffering as inevitable fate. He stood up, one man, against the entire political and religious establishment of Japan. His message was simple, direct, and utterly terrifying to the power structure. The Lotus Sutra is the only correct path to enlightenment in this age, and the established priests are teaching falsehoods that cause the suffering of the nation. This was not a gentle philosophical debate. This was a declaration of spiritual war against the ruling class.
The moment he delivered his core treatise, Risho Ankokuron, establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, his life became a continuous, brutal trial. He was not seeking popularity. He was not seeking comfort. He was seeking the absolute truth, and when he found it, he refused to compromise. He knew that the moment he compromised the law, he would compromise the happiness of every human being who would follow him. The authorities immediately understood the threat. If the people realized their own power, if they stopped accepting the status quo, the entire feudal system would collapse. So they began the persecution, banishment, assaults, attempts on his life.
This is critical. Nichiren did not experience suffering despite his deep faith. He experienced suffering because of it. His unwavering commitment to the ultimate truth drew the fiercest opposition imaginable. And this is where the Lion King mentality is defined.
Most people, when faced with overwhelming opposition, retreat. They compromise. They soften their message. They prioritize physical safety over spiritual integrity. Nichiren did the opposite. Every hardship, every betrayal, every attempt on his life only amplified his conviction. He viewed persecution not as a sign of failure, but as absolute proof that his practice was correct. He looked at the storm and roared back. He saw the forces trying to destroy him as the very forces required to reveal his own Buddhahood. He was not reacting to his environment. He was actively transforming it through the sheer force of his inner life. He wrote, "The greater the hardships befalling him, the greater the delight he feels, because they are the trials of the true practitioner." Think about that statement. It is a complete inversion of how the average person processes pain. We recoil from hardship. We feel cheated. We feel punished. Nichiren felt delight. Why? Because hardship, in the context of the Lion King mentality, is simply the resistance training necessary to build an invincible life. The problem is not an enemy to be avoided. It is an essential tool for forging indomitable character. He taught his followers that when the world attacks you for standing up for the law, you must not cower. You must not apologize. You must not negotiate your truth. You must meet that persecution with the full, non-negotiable dignity of a Buddha. This is the power of the lion's roar. It is the ability to look at the most terrifying situation, even facing the executioner's sword, and declare without hesitation, "I am not afraid. I am the one who dictates the outcome of this moment." His life became a living demonstration of the principle that nothing external can defeat the determined human spirit. He was physically exiled, impoverished, and hunted, yet internally he was the wealthiest, most fulfilled, and most sovereign being in all of Japan. The challenge for us today is that our persecutions are often quieter. They are not the sword, but the chronic anxiety, the crushing debt, the toxic relationship, the internal voice of self-doubt. These silent persecutions are just as effective at trapping us in the mindset of the sheep. We must learn to use the same spiritual posture Nichiren used against the Kamakura shogunate, against our own internal and external demons. We must learn to roar. We must understand the technology that made this posture possible, the practice of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. This is not a prayer for rescue. It is a declaration of inherent power. When you chant, you are not begging a deity for help. You are summoning the limitless, fearless life state of the Lion King that resides within you. It is the spiritual weaponry of the Buddha. Nichiren understood that the mind is the battlefield. If you lose the battle in your mind, if you let fear set the agenda, the external outcome is irrelevant.
You have already surrendered your crown. He had to survive the Tatsunokuchi persecution. This was the moment the authorities decided to silence him permanently. This was the ultimate test of the Lion King mentality.
In 1271, he was arrested and secretly taken to Tatsunokuchi Beach to be executed. They did not want a public spectacle. They simply wanted him gone. Imagine that walk. The cold night air. The soldiers surrounding you. The awareness that in minutes, your life, your mission will be ended by a blade. A normal man would be consumed by terror, regret, or bargaining. Nichiren was not a normal man. He was the embodiment of the lion's roar. As he was being led to the execution ground, he did not plead, he did not cry out. He looked at his captors and addressed them with absolute authority. He rebuked them for persecuting the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, warning them of the dire consequences they were bringing upon their nation.
He was the prisoner, yet he was lecturing his executioners. He was facing death, yet he was operating from the life state of the eternal, indestructible Buddha. He wrote later that at that moment he felt a profound sense of joy, as if he had been crowned the king of the law. He stepped onto the execution ground. The executioner raised his sword. And then, everything changed. According to the historical records, a brilliant object, like a luminous globe or a bolt of light, shot across the sky, terrifying the soldiers. The executioner dropped his sword, blinded or paralyzed by fear. The entire attempt failed. This event is not just a miracle. It is a fundamental lesson in spiritual causation. When you manifest the life state of the Lion King, the fearless, absolute conviction of Buddhahood, the universe, down to its physical laws, must reorganize itself around your determination. When Nichiren lowered, the blade fell.
The authorities, unable to kill him, banished him to Sado Island. Sado was a frozen, desolate wasteland, essentially a death sentence by exposure and starvation. Most exiles died there within months. Nichiren embraced it. I will be the eyes of Japan. I will be the great ship of Japan. This is not arrogance. This is the declaration of Bodhisattva vows, a commitment to shoulder the suffering of the entire world and transform it through one's own life. He was physically isolated on a frozen rock, yet spiritually he was the pillar supporting the entire nation. He was blind in the eyes of the government, yet he was declaring himself the eyes to see the truth. He was exiled, yet he was the ship guiding humanity through the stormy sea of suffering. The Lion King mentality is the refusal to accept any external definition of your worth or your power. It is the decision to define reality from the inside out. He taught his followers that even in the deepest winter, the seed of Buddhahood is already planted. He wrote, "Winter always turns to spring." This is not a sentimental hope. It is a statement of immutable cosmic law.
Just as the earth must rotate and the seasons must change, the darkness of suffering must yield to the light of enlightenment, provided you maintain the roar, provided you do not compromise your core practice. Sado was not a punishment. It was a demonstration of the power of the inner life. While the authorities thought they had silenced him, he was solidifying the foundation of a spiritual movement that would eventually span the globe. He was teaching us that the battlefield is not where you are, but how you are. If you are currently facing your own Sado Island, a period of intense isolation, financial drought, or existential dread, you must recognize it as the training ground. This is where you write your own master treatise. This is where you prove the indestructibility of your life. The Lion King does not wait for the sun to come out to feel powerful. The Lion King creates the sun by the force of its own conviction. When he finally returned from exile, he was not broken.
He was amplified. He was the living proof that the practice works. He had faced the full force of the state, death, and despair, and emerged stronger, clearer, and more determined. This is the legacy we inherit. We do not practice Buddhism to escape the storm. We practice to become the storm. We must stop viewing our problems as obstacles to happiness and start viewing them as the essential curriculum for absolute enlightenment. They are the means by which the lion's roar is perfected. The next step is understanding the mechanics. How do we translate Nichiren's 13th century spiritual steel into 21st century action? How do you use the technology of Daimoku to shatter the walls of your own fear? The technology of Daimoku is not a form of passive meditation. It is an act of spiritual combat. It is the sound you make when you are refusing to negotiate with darkness. When you chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, you are not asking the universe for favors.
You are declaring that your life, right now, in this moment of suffering or confusion, is one with the fundamental rhythm of the universe, the mystic law. Fear is nothing more than the temporary belief that you are separate from this rhythm. Fear is the illusion that the problem outside of you is bigger than the power inside of you. Daimoku is the systematic, rhythmic destruction of that illusion. Nichiren taught that the most crucial element is not the duration of the chanting, but the quality of the ichinen, the single determined moment of life. This is the source of the lion's roar. The lion's roar is the refusal to accept the current diagnosis. It is the spirit that says, this illness, this financial crisis, this betrayal, this anxiety, it is merely the fuel for my absolute unstoppable enlightenment. How do we know this works? We look back at the historical crucible where this philosophy was forged.
He faced the ultimate test of conviction, the Tatsunokuchi persecution. In 1271, after years of relentless warnings to the government, warnings that were consistently ignored and led to national disaster, Nichiren was arrested. He was not given a trial. He was marched out late at night to the execution grounds at Tatsunokuchi, ready to be beheaded. Imagine that moment, the cold, the armed guards, the executioner raising the sword. This is the ultimate confrontation with fear, with death, with the total annihilation of the self and the mission. This moment was the ultimate demonstration of the Lion King mentality. Nichiren did not plead for his life. He did not compromise his teaching. Instead, he turned to his executioners and delivered a powerful rebuke. He told them they were about to destroy the pillar of Japan, the true messenger of the Lotus Sutra, and that their country would suffer unimaginable consequences for this crime. He was not acting as a victim.
He was acting as the embodiment of the mystic law, commanding the cosmos. He was casting off the transient identity of Nichiren the priest and revealing the true,
eternal Buddha within. At the exact moment the executioner was about to strike, a brilliant object, a luminous sphere, shot across the sky, terrifying the guards and causing the execution to be abandoned. Whether you define that light as a cosmic intervention or the sheer explosive force of his spiritual conviction, the result is the same. The execution was stopped. The sword was deflected. His life was spared not by luck, but by the power of his inner state. The lion's roar was so absolute that it rearranged the external circumstances of reality. This is the lesson of Tatsunokuchi. Your life today is not defined by the sword hanging over you, be it debt, despair, or disease. Your life is defined by the conviction you hold as you face that sword. Do you flinch, or do you roar?
The practice of Daimoku is how you cultivate that spiritual steel. It is the daily training to ensure that when the moment of ultimate testing arrives, and it always does, your conviction is stronger than any blade. You must stop practicing as if you are asking for help. You must start practicing as if you are the help. The problems in your life are not meant to crush you. They are meant to serve as the backdrop against which your Buddhahood is revealed. They are the stage upon which you perform the lion's roar. We are not aiming for a life free of challenge. We are aiming for a life where no matter the challenge, our fundamental state remains unshakable, eternal, and victorious. This transition from being the sheep to becoming the lion requires a complete overhaul of how you view suffering. You must treat your current struggle as a spiritual declaration. The greater the challenge, the greater the proof you are about to create.
The darker the winter, the more brilliant the spring. Nichiren did not survive Tatsunokuchi to relax. He survived it to solidify the foundation of a practice that could empower every single person on earth to face their own spiritual execution grounds and emerge victorious. He gave us the blueprint for turning poison into medicine. He gave us the technology to transform fundamental darkness into fundamental enlightenment. And the core of that technology is the unwavering, non-negotiable sound of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, chanted with the intent of a lion king asserting sovereignty over its domain. Your domain is your life. Your fear is the trespasser. It is time to assert your authority. The lion's roar is not merely a reaction to a single crisis. It is the sustained spiritual posture that defines your entire existence.
When we study Nichiren's life, we are not reading a historical drama. We are reading a spiritual textbook, detailing how a human being transforms fundamental darkness into absolute light, day after day, year after year. The Tatsunuki persecution was the crescendo, the moment the sword was literally raised. But before and after that moment, the pressure was relentless. The lion's roar was necessary because Nichiren refused to compromise the truth. He was exiled, hunted, betrayed by his own disciples, and constantly targeted by the government and the established religious institutions of the time. Think about the exile to Sado Island. This was not a pleasant retreat.
It was a freezing, isolated, brutal environment designed to break the spirit and silence the voice. The authorities were convinced that isolation and physical hardship would force him to recant or simply freeze to death, removing the threat he posed to their authority. But what did Nichiren do on Sado?
Did he shrink? Did he spend his days lamenting his fate, asking why the mystic law had failed to protect him? Absolutely not. He used the deepest point of his suffering to write the most profound and revolutionary treatises of his life. He wrote major works like The Opening of the Eyes and The Object of Devotion for Observing the Mind. He took the ultimate poison, isolation, cold, threat of death, and transformed it into the ultimate medicine, the definitive explanation of his enlightened life and the purpose of his mission. He defined his existence not by the external conditions of Sado, but by the internal conviction that he was the Buddha of the latter day of the law. He asserted his Buddhahood in the face of absolute despair. This is the essence of the lion's roar mentality. It demands that you refuse to allow external circumstances to define your internal worth or the validity of your purpose. Your Sado Island might not be a physical exile.
It might be the isolation of depression, the frozen despair of debt, or the constant feeling of being undervalued and unheard. The fundamental demand of Nichiren's teaching is this: when you are in the deepest, coldest valley of your life, you do not use that suffering as an excuse to stop practicing. You use it as the fuel to roar louder. You must view the intensity of your current challenge as the perfect setup for the grandest proof. Every moment of persecution, every trial, every obstacle that Nichiren faced, he interpreted not as failure, but as validation. He knew that the Lotus Sutra predicted that its practitioners in the latter day of the law would face immense difficulty. Therefore, the difficulty itself became the proof that he was fulfilling the sutra's prophecy. The harder the attack, the more correct his path. The heavier the sword, the stronger the shield of the mystic law. This is the spiritual technology you must internalize.
When you face overwhelming financial pressure, do not see it as evidence that you are failing. See it as the weight necessary to forge the diamond-like determination required to achieve absolute financial independence. When you face illness, do not see it as a curse. See it as the ultimate opportunity to demonstrate the power of your life force, transforming your body and mind through sheer, unwavering conviction. The lion's roar is the sound of absolute faith confirming its own power against the heaviest resistance. It is the practice of seeing your struggle not as a setback, but as the mandatory curriculum for achieving true, unshakable victory. If your life were easy, if the mystic law simply served as a magic shield protecting you from all discomfort, you would never develop the spiritual muscle necessary to become a Lion King. You would remain a pampered cub. The persecutions are the weightlifting regimen of the spirit. They demand that you elevate your life state far beyond the realm of ordinary human suffering. Nichiren wrote that the winter never fails to turn into spring. But he did not mean that spring happens automatically. He meant that if you maintain the conviction, if you continue to roar, the transformation is inevitable. The spring is forged by the heat
of your sustained faith during the winter. You cannot wait for the circumstances to change before you decide to be happy, strong, or powerful. You must generate that power now, while the winter is at its darkest. Your Daimoku is not a request for warmer weather. It is the engine that generates the heat necessary to melt the ice of your own despair and the external resistance of reality. The historical truth of Nichiren's survival is not just an inspiring story. It is a fundamental guarantee.
If he, facing literal execution and exile, could transform his environment, then you, facing your modern challenges, possess the exact same power. You inherited the DNA of the Lion King. The only question is whether you are willing to use your voice to assert that sovereignty, or if you will continue to whisper your prayers like a fearful servant hoping for a handout. You must stop asking for permission to be happy. You must stop waiting for the universe to grant you a reprieve. The lion demands, the lion asserts, the lion defines reality by the sound of its own conviction. Your struggle is not a punishment, it is your stage. It is time to roar. It is time to roar. But what happens when the lion actually roars? What happens when the conviction is absolute and directed squarely at the forces that seek to destroy you? We have the historical answer. When Nichiren was captured at Tatsunokuchi, the Dragon's Mouth, and led out for execution, he did not plead for his life.
He did not whisper the Daimoku hoping for a divine intervention. He confronted the executioner. He challenged the state. He stood on the beach, the sword raised above his neck, and he roared. He demanded to know why they were trying to kill the pillar of Japan. He asserted his identity as the messenger of the Lotus Sutra, not as a defiant criminal, but as the sovereign entity who was correcting the nation's spiritual path. He didn't see the execution ground as a place of death. He saw it as the ultimate stage for proving the truth of the mystic law. And in that moment of absolute, unconditional conviction, the moment when the lion's roar reached its peak intensity, fate was shattered. A luminous object, described historically as a thunderbolt or a brilliant sphere, crossed the sky. The executioner was blinded by terror, dropping the sword. The soldiers scattered. The officials, paralyzed by fear and superstition, called off the execution.
This event, known as the Tatsunokuchi persecution, was not merely a miracle. It was the physical manifestation of a transformed life state. Nichiren himself later described this moment as the time when he cast off the transient and revealed the true. He stopped acting merely as a humble, albeit powerful, priest, and fully manifested his identity as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. He transformed the killing field into the place of his enlightenment. This is the ultimate lesson of the Lion King mentality. When you refuse to be defined by your circumstances, when you unleash the sound of your absolute conviction, you fundamentally alter the environment around you. The poison of execution became the medicine of profound spiritual revelation. The fear of death became the guarantee of eternal life. Your greatest challenge right now, that financial struggle, that toxic relationship, that health crisis, is your Tatsunokuchi.
It is the place where you either submit to the sword of despair, or you unleash the roar that shatters the cycle of suffering.
The mystic law is the power to transform poison into medicine. But transformation is not passive. It requires the active, conscious, and continuous assertion of your inherent Buddhahood. This is why the practice of Daimoku must never be a passive plea. It is not an attempt to bargain with the universe. It is the sound of the lion asserting its sovereignty over the realm of suffering. When you chant, you are not asking for money. You are asserting the limitless wealth of your own life. You are not asking for health. You are asserting the fundamental perfection of your inherent being. You are not asking for peace. You are asserting the unconditional victory that already resides within you. The frequency of your Daimoku must match the frequency of the lion's roar. It must be penetrating, resolute, and totally undiluted by doubt.
If you chant while secretly believing you are weak, you are whispering. If you chant while waiting for someone else to solve your problems, you are still acting like a sheep. The lion knows its power. It does not need permission to hunt. It does not need confirmation of its strength. It simply asserts its existence, and the entire jungle acknowledges it. Your life is the jungle. Your conviction is the roar. You must internalize this truth. You are not practicing Buddhism to escape reality. You are practicing to fundamentally command reality. Nichiren was exiled immediately after Tatsunokuchi to the desolate island of Sado. This was not a reprieve. It was a punishment designed to ensure his slow, agonizing death by starvation or cold. Yet, on that frozen, dark island, surrounded by enemies and cut off from the world, he wrote his most profound and essential treatises. He used the solitude and the suffering not as a burden, but as a forge. He proved that environmental hardship is irrelevant when the inner state is one of absolute, indestructible joy and confidence. He taught us that the human spirit, armed with the mystic law, is stronger than any political power, any natural disaster, or any personal tragedy. If you are waiting for the ideal conditions to practice powerfully, you fundamentally misunderstand the teaching. The power is revealed because the conditions are terrible. Do not look at your current problems as bad karma that must be endured. Look at them as the perfect material necessary to forge the ultimate sword of enlightenment. The greater the resistance, the louder the roar must be. The deeper the darkness, the brighter the faith must burn. This is the commitment that defines the Lion King. It is the refusal to compromise your conviction, no matter the severity of the threat. It is the understanding that the only thing that can truly defeat you is the abandonment of your own inner sovereignty.
Do not waste your suffering. Transform it immediately. The time for hesitation is over. The time for weak, fearful prayers is finished. You have inherited the spiritual weaponry of Nichiren. You have the ultimate practice. The question is not whether the law works, but whether you are willing to wield it with the power and fury of the lion. We are entering the final phase of this transformation. We must move beyond understanding the theory and into the realm of absolute, undeniable execution. I am not asking you to try harder. I am demanding that you commit fully. Look at your greatest fear. Stare it down.
Now, open your mouth and unleash the sound that defines your true identity. The world needs to hear the roar. Not tomorrow. Not when things get easier. Now. The roar is not a concept. It is a vibrational technology.
The sound that Nichiren identified as the ultimate expression of the Lion King's life state, the sound that shatters fundamental darkness, is Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. This is not a mantra to calm your nerves. This is the declaration of the eternal truth inherent in your life, spoken into the universe. It is the sound of the law itself. When you sit down and face your Gohonzon, or simply face the reality of your life, you are not engaging in passive meditation. You are entering the arena. Every single syllable of Daimoku is an act of spiritual assertion. It is the fusion of your finite self with the limitless, eternal life of the cosmos. You are not begging a higher power for a favor. You are commanding your own life to manifest its ultimate potential, right here, right now. You are declaring without reservation that the Buddha is you. The quality of your Daimoku determines the quality of your victory. If you chant weakly, distracted by doubt, treating it like a chore or a whisper of hope, you are offering the universe the energy of a sheep, and the universe responds accordingly, reflecting that weakness back to you as continued struggle and fear. But when you chant with the absolute conviction that this sound, generated by your life, is the single decisive sword stroke necessary to cut through the chains of karma, then you are unleashing the lion. You must chant with fury. You must chant with gratitude. You must chant with the unshakable determination that the problem you are facing will be the exact mechanism for your profound enlightenment. The Daimoku is the energy source that transforms poison into medicine. But transformation requires power. It requires heat. It requires the sustained, focused pressure of a life refusing to accept defeat. Stop waiting for inspiration. Stop waiting for faith to feel easy. Faith is the decision to execute the practice when everything in the environment is screaming for you to quit. The true test of the Lion King mentality is not how you chant when you feel good, but how you chant when you are exhausted, terrified, and cornered. In those moments, the Daimoku must not be a gentle request. It must be a vow. It must be a thunderclap that shakes the foundations of your fear. You must chant for absolute, undeniable proof. Proof that your life is the mystic law. Proof that you are the Buddha. Proof that Nichiren's promise is real. And that proof is not granted by external forces. It is forged by the intensity of your own unwavering practice. The suffering you are currently enduring, the financial pressure, the relationship breakdown, the health crisis. This is not an interruption to your practice. This is the stage set for your greatest performance. This is the fuel. Use the anxiety. Use the frustration.
Channel the raw energy of your current despair and drive it into the sound of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Your life is the script. Your voice is the weapon. Do not postpone the victory. Do not allow another moment of doubt to steal your power. The time for theory is over. The time for execution is now. Go to your altar. Sit down. Look at the problem that has been paralyzing you. Look at the fear that has been turning you into an easy target. Now, open your mouth and roar. Let the universe know that the lion is awake. The victory begins the moment you unleash the sound. Do not stop until the darkness is shattered and the true nature of your life state is revealed. Roar.